I am Chloe, 29 years old, and my world ended the day they handed me a folded flag instead of my husband. Marcus was a soldier, a hero, my everything. But the morning after his funeral, I came home to find my in-laws changing the locks. Blood family only. Your time here is over, his father Jerome announced coldly. I stood there on the porch of my home, numb, watching them pile my life into cardboard boxes. They even tossed Marcus's service medals on top of a trash bag. I watched them for a long moment, then looked Jerome straight in the eye and said, "You forgot one thing." Before I tell you what they forgot, and how I took back everything my husband intended for me, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to fight for what is rightfully yours. The air was still cold from the morning mist. I was exhausted, my eyes raw from crying for 48 hours straight. All I wanted was to crawl into the bed I had shared with Marcus, pull the covers over my head, and pretend the world did not exist. But that small comfort was ripped away the moment I saw the unfamiliar van parked in my driveway. A man I had never seen before was hunched over my front door, tools in hand. "Excuse me," I said, my voice hoarse. "What are you doing?" Before he could answer, the door swung open. My father-in-law Jerome stood there. He was 55, imposing, and not in a suit of mourning, but in a pressed polo shirt. He looked annoyed, as if I were interrupting his day. "You're back," he stated flatly. "We thought you'd be at the funeral home handling arrangements." "I finished," I whispered, stepping toward the door. "Jerome, why is this man changing my locks?" That is when I saw her. Bethany, my brother-in-law's wife, stepped out from the living room. She was holding a large black trash bag. "Oh, Chloe, you're still here," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Bethany was the only white person in this family, and she always seemed to think the best way to fit in was to be the cruelest to me, the other outsider. "We're just getting a head start on clearing things out. You know, to help you." She walked past me to the porch and dropped the bag. Several of my sweaters spilled out, along with a framed photo of Marcus and me from our wedding day. The glass cracked on the concrete. "Bethany!" I cried out, lunging for the photo. "What are you doing?" "That's trash now, isn't it?" she said with a shrug. "Memories from a life that's over." "Get your hands off her things!" a voice boomed. It was Jerome. He was not defending me. He was directing the locksmith. "Just finish the job. We need this handled before the end of the day." He turned to me, his face set in a cold mask. "I told you, your time here is over." "This is my home," I insisted, my voice finally rising. "Marcus and I lived here for 5 years." "Marcus is gone," Jerome spat. "And with him your connection to this family, this house, this property. It all reverts to blood. It belongs to us now." My mother-in-law Vivian appeared behind him, wringing her hands. "Chloe, dear," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Jerome is right. This is a family home. It needs to stay in the family. For Antoine, for the real grandchildren." The dig was intentional. Marcus and I had been waiting for him to finish his tour before starting a family. Antoine and Bethany already had a son, the true heir in their eyes. "We're just tidying up," Bethany chirped, coming back out with another box. This one was filled with my toiletries and makeup. "Honestly, we're doing you a favor. You don't have the money to keep this place anyway." "That's none of your business," I said, my hands clenching. Antoine, my brother-in-law, finally made his appearance. He was 32 but still acted like a spoiled teenager. "Look, Chloe, let's just make this easy," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Dad's right. You're out, but we're not monsters." He pulled out a few bills. "Here's $500 for your trouble. Go get a hotel room or something." He held the money out to me as if I were a dismissed employee, not a grieving widow. The locksmith finished his work. He handed the new set of keys to Jerome, avoiding my eyes. "It's done," Jerome said, pocketing the keys. "Get your boxes off my porch and be gone by the time I get back." "Where are you going?" I asked, stunned. "To the church," Vivian said, reapplying her lipstick. "We have to finalize the menu for the repast tomorrow. Jerome's company is handling it, you know. We have to make sure everything is perfect for the community. Of course. Jerome's premier events. Their catering company was their entire identity. They were leaving me homeless on the street, but they were worried about the catering. They started walking toward their car, all four of them a united front of cold-hearted greed. I stood there on the walkway surrounded by the wreckage of my life. The cracked wedding photos stared up at me. The locksmith was packing his tools, refusing to look at me. "You forgot one thing," I said, my voice suddenly clear and loud. They all stopped. Jerome turned around slowly, annoyed. "What now?" "I am still Marcus's wife, his widow." Jerome laughed, a short, ugly sound. "That and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. That paper means nothing now." "And you forgot one other thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm calling the police, not to stop you, but to report you for trespassing." Antoine laughed. "Trespassing? You're the one trespassing, sweetheart." "No," I said, my finger hovering over the 911 buttons. "I'm not. You see, this is my house, and you have 5 minutes to put my things back inside before I have every single one of you arrested for breaking and entering." "This is my house," I shouted, my voice cracking over the sound of the locksmith drilling into my own front door. "This is mine and Marcus's house." My mother-in-law Vivian actually laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound that didn't match her polished church lady exterior. "Oh, sweetie, don't be hysterical," she said, waving a dismissive hand, her diamond rings catching the light. "This house was bought by his father. It belongs to his family." "I am his family." I screamed back, the tears I had held back at the funeral now streaming hot down my face. "I am his wife." "We're child. You were," she corrected, her voice void of all sympathy. Her words were just another shovelful of dirt on my husband's grave. This wasn't new, this was just louder. For 5 years this had been the pattern. Marcus was a soldier, proud of his service, and his deployments were long. He'd be gone for 6, 9, sometimes 12 months at a time, leaving me to manage our life, our home. And every single time his boots walked out that door, my in-laws walked in. They called it checking on me. But it was never about support. It was surveillance. It was Vivian walking through my kitchen, running a finger over the granite countertop. My Antoine would never let his wife live in such a disorganized house. But I suppose when the man is away. It was Jerome looking at the repairs I had organized for the roof. "Marcus is sending you his combat pay, isn't he? You make sure you're saving it, girl, not wasting it on frivolous things." Frivolous things like a roof that didn't leak. The worst of it, the weapon they sharpened every single visit, was our lack of children. "It's a shame, really," Vivian said just last Christmas, looking at me over her wine glass while the rest of the family pretended not to listen. "A man needs a legacy. He needs a son to carry on the name. It must be so hard for Marcus being married all this time with nothing to show for it." Nothing to show for it. As if our love, our partnership, this home we were building was nothing. They never knew the truth. They never knew about the quiet, agonizing conversations Marcus and I had over grainy video calls. "Just one more tour, baby," he had promised, his voice tired from 20 hours in the desert heat. "When I'm home for good, we start. We'll paint that spare room yellow, I promise." We were waiting. We were waiting for a life where our child wouldn't have to watch their father leave for a war zone. It was a responsible choice, a loving choice. But they twisted it into my failure, my barrenness. And then there was Bethany. She had married Antoine, the golden boy who never had to work a day in his life, and she produced the one thing they all craved, a male heir. Little Jerome Jr. Bethany wielded that child like a weapon. At every family gathering, she would parade him around, dressing him in miniature versions of Jerome's expensive suits. "Oh, Chloe, you wouldn't understand," she'd say, pulling the boy away when I offered him a cookie. "The bond between a mother and her son is just different. It's biological. It's blood." She looked at me now, standing on the porch next to her husband, that same venomous smirk playing on her lips. She was watching me being thrown out. This house is for the real family now. She added her voice just loud enough for me to hear. The one that's actually growing. I looked at her. At all of them. The cold, greedy faces of the people who were supposed to be my family. The people who had danced at my wedding and were now dancing on my husband's grave. My thumb pressed the green call button on my phone. Yes, I said to the 911 operator, my voice no longer shaking. I'd like to report a trespassing. My in-laws are illegally evicting me from my home. My thumb was still pressed against the glass of my phone, the 911 operator's voice still echoing in the hallway. Ma'am, a unit is being dispatched. Jerome's face, which had been a mask of smug authority, turned a dark, furious purple. But it was Antoine who laughed first. It was a high, wheezing sound that grated on my raw nerves. She actually did it, he shrieked, pointing at me as if I were a circus animal. She's calling the cops on us. Jerome's shock vanished, replaced by a dark, calculated rage. Let her! He boomed, his confidence returning instantly. He crossed his arms, a picture of absolute, unmovable power. They can't get here before we're done. He nodded sharply at Antoine. Get her trash out. All of it. Now. Antoine, energized by his father's command, marched to the small table by the door where I had dropped my purse when I first walked in. He picked it up between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a piece of rotten fruit. You've got a lot of nerve, Chloe, he spat, coming in here acting like you own the place. He walked to the open front door and with a vicious flick of his wrist threw my purse. It skidded across the concrete porch, spilling my wallet, my keys, and a tube of lipstick. I flinched, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Dad's right, Antoine said. He reached into his designer wallet, the one I knew Marcus had bought him for his last birthday, and pulled out a thick wad of cash. He peeled off 5 crisp $100 bills. He stalked back to where I was standing, frozen by the doorway. He didn't hand me the money. He held it up, crumpled it in his fist, and threw it at my feet. The bills scattered on the welcome mat. Here's $500, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Consider it your final paycheck, a bonus for servicing my brother for the last 5 years. Now get out of our house before I throw you out. I stared at the money on the floor. My throat felt like it was closing. I would not give them the satisfaction of tears. Not again. You think this is just about a house, don't you? Jerome said, stepping closer. He was trying to intimidate me, to break me before the police arrived. You think you can just call the cops and win? You are nothing in this community, girl. I am this community. I looked at him confused. I already spoke to Pastor James this morning. He continued, his voice low and menacing. I explained the situation. I told him how you've been unstable since Marcus's deployment, how you were never a good wife to him, how you're trying to steal his legacy from his grieving parents. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just evicting me, he was erasing me. He agreed. Jerome smiled, seeing the horror on my face. The church, our friends, everyone, they will stand with us. By the time the police get here, this will be a family dispute. And by tomorrow, you won't have a friend left in this city. You'll be the crazy, greedy widow who tried to steal a house from a Gold Star family. It was a perfect trap. He was attacking my home, my finances, and now my reputation. He was salting the earth. Vivian, who had been silent, stepped forward, her face a mask of fake pity. It's for the best, Chloe. You were never really our kind. Go back to wherever you came from. I felt the last bit of fight drain out of me. They had thought of everything. They would win. They always win. Antoine grabbed the first box he saw, one filled with my books and journals, and carried it to the door. Dad, where do you want this stuff? On the curb, Jerome commanded. Where it belongs. Antoine shoved the box through the door. It was too heavy and he wasn't paying attention. The box tipped over, spilling its contents onto the porch right on top of my purse. And that's when I saw it. Underneath a copy of Beloved and my college notebooks was the wooden case. The case they had handed me at the funeral yesterday. The case containing the American flag that had draped my husband's casket. It had fallen out of the box and the lid had popped open. The perfectly folded triangle of stars and stripes lay half in, half out of its case, resting on the damp, dirty concrete of the porch. Bethany, walking by, nudged it with her foot. Ugh, more of his old army junk. Something inside me, something cold and broken, snapped. The numbness vanished, replaced by a white-hot rage that burned away the grief, the fear, and the shock. I took one step forward. Don't you touch that. My voice was low, unrecognizable, a growl. They all froze. I walked past Antoine, past Jerome, and knelt on the porch. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness, from fury. I carefully lifted the flag, checking it for dirt, my fingers brushing the embroidered stars. I closed the case, holding it to my chest. I stood up slowly and turned to face them. They were all staring, momentarily thrown off by my change in demeanor. "You're right," I said, my voice ice. "You did forget one thing." Jerome raised an eyebrow. "Your dignity. You lost that when you dialed 911. "No," I said, taking a step toward him, clutching the flag case like a shield. "You forgot who my husband was. You forgot who I am. And you definitely forgot to check the mail." I stood up, holding the flag case against my chest like armor. The rage was so cold, so clear, it burned away my tears. I looked at Jerome. "You forgot one thing." He actually scoffed, a deep, arrogant sound. "What's that, girl? Your little marriage certificate? That paper is worthless now. It's just a souvenir from a contract that expired the second my son stopped breathing." His words were meant to destroy me, to break whatever I had left. But all they did was fuel the fire. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos of the hallway. They all stopped. Even Antoine, who was halfway to the door with another box, paused. "You forgot," I said, looking each of them in the eye, "that this is my house, and you are trespassing." Bethany let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "Oh, honey, are you deaf? Or just stupid? We already told you." I ignored her. I held Jerome's gaze as I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. My hands were perfectly steady. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency?" My voice was clear and calm. "Yes, I need to report a breaking and entering in progress. My in-laws are illegally changing the locks on my home and throwing my possessions onto the street." Jerome's face went from purple rage to a pale, shocked white. "She's bluffing," Antoine whispered, but he didn't move. "No, I'm not," I said, turning my back to them, still speaking to the operator. "My address is 422 Willow Creek Drive. I am a new widow. My husband, Staff Sergeant Marcus King, was just buried yesterday. His family is here, Jerome, Vivian, Antoine, and Bethany King. They are trying to evict me from my home." "Hang up that phone," Jerome finally roared, taking a step toward me. "You are making a fool of yourself." I held up one hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Yes, I'm here alone. I am afraid. My father-in-law is threatening me right now. He's telling me I'll regret this." Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Chloe, stop this. Stop this madness. What will the neighbors think?" "You should have thought of that before you threw my wedding photos in the trash," I said. Bethany was the first to truly panic. Unlike Jerome and Antoine, who were running on pure ego, she understood the social and legal ramifications of having the police show up. "Jerome, make her stop," she hissed. "This is not a good look. This could get in the papers." I finished my call. "Yes, that's correct. They are still here. Please hurry." I disconnected and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I turned to face them. 4 people who just minutes ago held all the power. Now they were just intruders. They were just criminals. "The police are on their way," I announced. "They should be here in under 3 minutes. I suggest you get your hands off my property, and I strongly suggest you are all gone before they arrive." Antoine looked at his father. "Dad, what do we do?" Jerome just stared at me, his jaw working silently. He had built his entire life on controlling his family, his community, his church. He could bully a grieving widow. He could manipulate his pastor. But he couldn't bully a 911 dispatch log. The sound of distant sirens growing closer broke the standoff. You bitch, Jerome finally whispered, his voice thick with hatred. You'll pay for this. I already have, I said, opening the door wider for the approaching police. Now get out of my house. The sirens were close. So close. I held the wooden case tight to my chest, the folded flag inside, feeling like the only solid thing left in the world. The sound grew louder, screaming down our quiet suburban street, and I saw a flicker of genuine panic in Antoine's eyes. Jerome, however, recomposed himself instantly. The mask of the grieving patriarch snapped back into place. He smoothed his polo shirt, walked to the front door, and stood there ready to perform. A patrol car, lights flashing, pulled up to the curb right behind Jerome's black Escalade. 2 officers stepped out. The first was an older black man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a tired, seen-it-all look in his eyes. His name tag read Hayes. The second was younger Officer Ramirez, sharp and observant, taking in the scene, the locksmith's van, the boxes on the porch, me standing in the doorway, clutching a military funeral flag. "What's the trouble here?" Officer Hayes asked, his voice calm and deep. Jerome stepped forward, intercepting him on the walkway. He put his hands up in a gesture of weary cooperation. "Officer, thank God you're here. This is all a terrible, terrible misunderstanding." Vivian materialized beside him, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "We're in mourning, officer," she whispered. "We just buried my son yesterday. Our hero, Marcus King." Officer Hayes's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. We got a call about a break-in, a trespass." No, nothing like that," Jerome said quickly, shaking his head. "That's my daughter-in-law, Chloe." He gestured toward me, his tone thick with pity. "She's not well. The grief, you understand. She's confused. She thinks we're trying to hurt her, but this is my home. We're just trying to secure the property now that my son is gone." He was good. He was so good. In 30 seconds, he had painted me as the hysterical, unstable widow and himself as the patient, grieving father. "This is the family home," Jerome continued. "I bought it 20 years ago. My son was just living here. Now that he's passed, the house reverts to me, the owner. We were just getting things in order." He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket. "Here, the property tax bill. You can see my name, Jerome King." Officer Hayes took the paper, glancing at it. He looked past Jerome, his eyes landing on me. I hadn't moved. I just stood there holding the flag case, my tears dried my expression like ice. "Ma'am," Officer Hayes called out to me, "what's your side of this? The caller said you live here." Before I could even open my mouth, Bethany pushed past Jerome. "Officer, please," she said, stepping right in front of him. She even placed her pale, manicured hand on the black officer's arm, a gesture of familiarity that was dangerously out of place. "This is so embarrassing. My father-in-law is right. She's completely hysterical. We've been worried about her mental state for months." Officer Hayes looked pointedly at her hand on his arm until she awkwardly pulled it away. "You should be asking her," Bethany pressed on, her voice high and insistent, "how she even thinks she has a claim. My brother-in-law, God rest his soul, was a provider. He took care of her, but he just died. She hasn't even been a widow for 48 hours, and she's already trying to steal everything from this grieving family." She gestured to Vivian, who produced a fresh sob on cue. "A gold digger," Bethany whispered, just loud enough for the officers to hear. "She never gave Marcus a child, you know. Now she's trying to take the family home. It's disgusting." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. They were using every stereotype in the book: the hysterical woman, the gold-digging wife, the barren, ungrateful daughter-in-law. They were executing my character in front of armed men, all to steal my house. Officer Hayes listened to this tirade with an unreadable expression. He didn't look at Bethany. He kept his eyes on me. "Ma'am," he said again, his voice cutting through Bethany's performance. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Is your name on any paperwork for this house?" I took a breath. I looked at Jerome's smug face, at Vivian's fake tears, at Antoine who was smirking from the doorway, at Bethany who looked triumphant, certain her intervention had sealed the deal. "Yes, officer," I said, my voice clear and strong. "It is. But you don't need to see my paperwork. You can check the public record for this county." Jerome's smile wavered. "What did you say?" "I said you can check the public record," I repeated, walking slowly down the steps until I was standing just a few feet from them. "The tax bill you showed him is 2 years old. It's out of date." I gave Officer Ramirez the address. "If you check the county clerk's database, sir, you'll find the deed that was filed on April 14th, 2 years ago. The one where Jerome King sold this property to Marcus and Chloe King." Jerome's face went completely blank. "What?" he whispered. "What did you say?" "Check it," I urged the officer. "You'll also see that we filed as joint tenants with right of survivorship." Officer Hayes, who had been watching this exchange intently, suddenly understood. His tired eyes sharpened. "Right of survivorship," he repeated, looking at Jerome. That means, I said, finishing his sentence, "that the moment my husband died, I became the sole legal 100% owner of this property. This isn't a family dispute, officer. This is a criminal matter. These people are trespassing, and I want them gone." I held the flag case tighter. Gold digger. Hysterical. Confused. These were the words they had always used to diminish me. For 5 years, any time I questioned their behavior, I was too sensitive. Any time I achieved something on my own, I was lucky, or not a team player. They had an entire vocabulary designed to keep me in my place, beneath them, beneath her. Officer Hayes was still looking at me, his gaze patient. He had not reacted to Bethany's outburst, which I was grateful for. He just waited. "Officer," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air as calm as his. "That piece of paper he gave you?" I nodded at the tax bill in his hand. "It's 2 years out of date. It's meaningless." Jerome laughed. "Meaningless, girl. I've paid the taxes on this property for 20 years. That's the bill they sent me last quarter." "That's because you never updated your mailing address with the county," I said. Vivian scoffed. "Why would he? It's his house." I ignored them and looked directly at Officer Ramirez, the younger one who was standing near their patrol car's computer terminal. "Officer, if you want the truth, you just need to check the public record. My husband Marcus was meticulous about records." My voice hitched on his name, the only crack in my armor. I swallowed. "The parcel ID for this property is 042250001. If you run that through the county assessor's database, you will see the current legal deed of record." Jerome's smile wavered. He looked at Antoine, confused. "What's she talking about? What database?" Bethany, however, looked nervous. As a white woman who had likely purchased her own property, she understood terms like deed and database far better than Jerome, who operated on assumptions of patriarchal power. "She's bluffing," Bethany said, but her voice was a full octave higher. "She's just trying to stall. Officer, just look at us. We are his family. She was, just his wife." "I am his wife," I said. "And in the state of Georgia, that means something." I turned back to Officer Hayes, who was watching me intently. "My husband Marcus bought this house from his father 2 years ago." "He what?" Jerome and Vivian shouted in unison. "He bought it," I repeated. "We were tired of you dropping by whenever he was deployed. We were tired of you treating me like a guest in my own home. He wanted us to have a real start, something that was truly ours, something you couldn't control." I remembered that night perfectly. Marcus had just gotten his bonus from the re-enlistment. I thought we would put it into savings. Instead, he came home with a stack of papers and a bottle of champagne. "It's done," He had set his smile so wide. He fought me on it. Dad wanted to just give it to me so he could always hold it over our heads, but I made him take the money. I paid him full market value. It's ours, Chloe. His name, my name. No one can ever make you feel unwelcome here again. He had been protecting me. Even then he knew what his father was. He didn't just buy it. I said, my voice gaining strength as I remembered Marcus's pride that night. He was smart. His lawyer structured the deed specifically to protect us. I looked at Jerome, who was now pale, a sickly gray color under his dark skin. The deed is filed as Marcus King and Chloe King as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Officer Hayes took a sharp breath. He knew exactly what that meant. Jerome and Vivian just looked confused. What is that? Vivian stammered. It means, Vivian, I said, enjoying the moment of clarification, that the deed supersedes any will. It means the moment Marcus took his last breath, his 50% share of the house didn't go into probate. It didn't go to his father or his mother. It immediately and automatically transferred to the other person on the deed. It transferred to me. All eyes snapped to Officer Ramirez, who was walking back from his car holding his small computer. Well, Jerome demanded, tell her she's crazy. Officer Ramirez looked at his partner, then at Jerome. Sir, the public record database confirms her story. The deed was updated 26 months ago. The owners of record are Marcus and Chloe King, filed as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Officer Hayes nodded slowly. He unhooked his radio from his shoulder. Which means, Officer Hayes said, his deep voice leaving no room for argument, that as of yesterday morning, this woman, Chloe King, is the sole 100% legal owner of this property. He turned his gaze on Jerome. Legally speaking, Mr. King, you are the one trespassing. The silence that followed the officer's words was thick and heavy. You could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower, a neighbor's dog barking. All the normal sounds of a suburban morning that felt alien in the middle of my world, collapsing. Vivian, my mother-in-law, was the first to break. She let out a small, wounded sound like a bird. Bought it, she whispered, her eyes wide, clutching Jerome's arm. Marcus bought it. With what money? He never had that kind of money. She must have. She stole it. The shriek came from Bethany. It ripped through the quiet morning, sharp and venomous. Her perfectly styled blonde bob was practically vibrating with rage. The color rushed back into her face, blotchy and red. You lying, scheming bitch! She took a lurching step toward me, her hand raised, nails out. You manipulated him, you got him killed, and now you're trying to steal his home. Before she could take another step, Officer Hayes moved between us. He was a big man, and he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His presence was a solid wall. Ma'am, he said, looking down at Bethany, you need to calm yourself, right now. But she's a liar, Bethany screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's a gold-digging fraud. He was a soldier, he was a hero, and she's spitting on his memory. Ma'am, I am not going to warn you again, Officer Hayes said, his voice dropping an octave. The tiredness was gone, replaced by steel. Your opinion of this lady is not my concern. The law is, and the law says this is her house. If you continue to scream and make threats, I will arrest you for disorderly conduct. Do you understand me? Bethany's mouth snapped shut. Her chest was heaving. She looked at Jerome, her eyes wide, pleading with him to do something to fix this, to put the world back on its axis where she and her husband were the priority, and I was nothing. But Jerome was still staring at me. He was processing. I could see the wheels turning. He wasn't just losing the house. He was losing his power. He was losing his standing as the patriarch right here on the front porch in front of me. Officer Hayes turned to him. Mr. King, you and your family need to leave the premises. Now. Leave, Jerome repeated. The word sounded foreign in his mouth. I'm not going anywhere. This is a family matter. This is a misunderstanding. We will sort this out with our lawyers. You can sort this out from anywhere you like, sir. Officer Ramirez, the younger officer, chimed in. But it won't be from here. As of this moment, your presence on this property without the owner's permission is criminal trespass. They all looked at me. The throb in my head, the ache in my bones, it all faded. That cold, clear rage I felt when Bethany kicked the flag case washed over me again. You heard him, Jerome, I said. He flinched. I had never, not once in 5 years, called him by his first name. It was always Dad or Mr. King. The shift was not lost on him. This is my house, I said. And you are trespassing. I looked at the locksmith who was frozen by his van, his tools still spread on the porch. You, I called out. You were hired by him. You are also trespassing. Pack your things. The locksmith didn't need to be told twice. He practically threw his drill into his bag. I turned back to my family. I want all of you off my property in the next 60 seconds. Antoine, who had been silent, looked at the boxes still stacked in the hallway. What about all this? What about it? I asked. It's your trash. He stammered, his earlier bravado completely gone. I walked over to the box that had tipped over the one with my cracked wedding photo and the flag case. I bent down and reverently picked up the wooden case, my fingers tracing the brass military seal. I held it to my chest. I looked at Jerome. Before you go, you're going to fix what you broke. I'm not touching your damn things, he spat. Officer Hayes, I said, not taking my eyes off Jerome. My father-in-law and his son have illegally removed my personal property from my home. They've damaged my belongings, including the casket flag of my deceased husband. I want them to put it back. Officer Hayes let out a long, weary sigh. Sir, it would be in your best interest to comply. Put the lady's things back inside the house. This is humiliation, Vivian cried, her voice thin. You can't make us do this. This, I said, my voice like ice, is consequences. Jerome's entire body was shaking with rage. He looked at the officer. He looked at me. He knew he was trapped. He turned to his son. Antoine, put the boxes back. What? Me? Antoine looked horrified, as if I'd asked him to clean a toilet. Put them back! Jerome roared, his voice cracking. The next 5 minutes were the most satisfying and the most pathetic I had ever witnessed. Antoine, his expensive designer shirt already damp with sweat, was forced to pick up every box and every trash bag. Bethany, now silent and pale, was forced to bend down and pick up my spilled lipstick and my wallet. Vivian was weeping quietly in the passenger seat of their Escalade. Jerome just stood by the open driver's door, his arms crossed, watching his son do manual labor, his reputation evaporating in the morning sun. When the last box was placed inside the hallway, I stood in the doorway. Thank you for your help, officer, I said to Hayes. I think they're done here. Our pleasure, ma'am. I'm truly sorry for your loss, he said, and I knew he meant it. He and his partner got in their car. The locksmith sped away. Jerome's family piled into their Escalade. Jerome was the last one in. He paused before getting in the driver's seat. He pointed a finger at me, a violent shaking gesture. This isn't over, he snarled, his voice low but carrying over the rumble of the engine. You think you're smart, don't you? You think you won. You have no idea what Marcus was involved in. You're going to regret this. I swear on my son's grave you will regret this. He slammed the door and the Escalade peeled out of the driveway, leaving a trail of rubber on the asphalt. I stood there for a long time. The threat was chilling. You have no idea what Marcus was involved in. He wasn't just angry. He was certain. He thought he had one more card to play. I closed the door, the new lock clicking into place. I was safe for now. But Jerome's words echoed in my head. I immediately picked up my phone. I didn't call 911 this time. I scrolled to E. Elijah, I said as soon as he answered. It's Chloe. They're gone. But I think there's something else. Something Marcus didn't tell me. Jerome said I'd regret this. He said I had no idea what Marcus was involved in. Elijah, What did he mean? I sank onto the floor of my living room, the wooden flag case clutched tight in my arms. The house was silent. Too silent. The smell of the locksmith's industrial lubricant hung in the air, a metallic reminder of the violation. Jerome's threat echoed in my ears. You have no idea what Marcus was involved in. You will regret this. What did that mean? What could be worse than what they had already done? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping it was Elijah, my lawyer, calling me back. It wasn't. It was my Aunt Josephine, my mother-in-law's sister. I hadn't spoken to her in months. I answered, a flicker of hope in my chest. Maybe she was calling to check on me. Chloe? Her voice was sharp, accusatory. What in God's name did you do? I was so startled I couldn't speak. Vivian just called me. She barreled on, absolutely hysterical, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. She said you called the police on her. You threw her and Jerome out of their own home the day after they buried their son. Chloe, what kind of monster are you? I tried to find my voice. Auntie, that's not what happened. It's my house. It's legally my house. They were throwing my things out. I don't want to hear about your legal paper, she snapped. I am talking about respect. I am talking about family. Those are your elders, Chloe. They are grieving. They just lost their firstborn son. And you chose to call the police on them over furniture, over bricks. What kind of woman did your mother raise? Don't you dare call this family again. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. It was happening. Jerome wasn't bluffing. He had already poisoned the well. He was painting me as the villain, the cold-hearted widow who cared more about a house than her grieving family. Before I could even process the cruelty of her words, my phone buzzed again. This time a text message. It was from Deaconess Miller from our church. Sister Chloe, Pastor James needs to see you immediately. He has heard some deeply concerning reports about your actions yesterday. Please call the church office at once. My stomach twisted. This was his next move. The church. The one place I thought I could find sanctuary. Jerome and Vivian were pillars of the community. They donated generously to the building fund. They hosted the pastor for dinner. I knew even as I dialed what I was about to hear. Chloe. Pastor James's voice was not warm. It was cold, deep, and full of disappointment. I am praying for your soul, child. Pastor, I started. Please, you have to listen to me. Jerome and Vivian, they tried to secure their son's legacy. He interrupted, his voice rising with righteous indignation. They are in mourning, Chloe. They are a Gold Star family. And I hear from Jerome that in their moment of deepest grief you chose to call the worldly authorities on them, over a house, over possessions. It was my home, I whispered. Marcus gave it to me. And the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, he boomed. A house is just a thing. Family is forever. Your husband is gone, but his parents remain. Your duty is to them now. The Lord does not bless a heart full of greed, Chloe. He does not bless a spirit of disrespect. You need to pray on this. You need to go to Jerome and Vivian on your knees, and you need to beg their forgiveness. Make this right with them. The family must come first. He hung up. I sat there, the silence of the room roaring in my ears. He hadn't asked for my side of the story. He had delivered my sentence. I was alone. My extended family thought I was a monster. My church thought I was a sinner. My laptop, still open on the coffee table from the night before, pinged with an email. It was from David, my boss at the nonprofit where I worked as a data analyst. The subject line was just one word: urgent. I clicked on the video link, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my broken ribs. David's face appeared. He was a good man, and he looked deeply uncomfortable. Chloe, he said, not meeting my camera. I just got off the phone with Jerome King. What? My voice was a croak. Why would he call you? He's a major donor, Chloe. You know that. He, he's on the advisory board for our annual housing gala. David finally looked at me, his eyes full of pity. He told me about your dispute. He said you're emotionally unstable. His words. He said you've been making threats, that you're trying to leverage your husband's death to seize family assets that aren't yours. David, that is a lie, I shouted, my voice breaking. He was trying to illegally evict me. I have the deed. The police sided with me. Chloe. Chloe, calm down, David said, raising his hands. I'm sure it's all very complicated, but you have to understand our position. We're a non-profit. We survive on community trust and on the goodwill of donors. I can't have one of my lead analysts in a public ugly feud with a major community figure like Jerome King. It doesn't look good for us. What are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. He strongly suggested you need time off, a leave of absence, indefinitely, to get your affairs in order. I had been fired. In less than 24 hours, Jerome had taken my community, my church, and now my job. I was alone in a house I had fought for with no income and no one to turn to. Jerome's final threat echoed in my ears. You will regret this. He was right. I was already regretting it. I was losing. I had won the battle for the house, but he was burning down my entire world in response. I drove. That's all I remember doing. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel of my 4-year-old sedan, the one Jerome always called that little tin can. I drove through the streets of my own city feeling like a ghost. My phone sitting silent on the passenger seat felt like a bomb. Aunt Josephine's words, "What kind of monster are you?" Pastor James's words, "You need to go to them on your knees." And finally, David, my boss. A leave of absence. Indefinitely. It just doesn't look good for us. He had done it. In less than 24 hours, Jerome had executed a scorched earth campaign. He had successfully painted me as the villain. The greedy, unstable, hysterical widow. He had turned my family, my church, and my job against me. He was trying to erase me from my own life. I found myself parked in the sterile concrete garage beneath Elijah's law firm. He had returned my frantic call immediately. Stay there. I'm coming down. He met me at the elevator, his face a mask of professional calm. He was a sharp man in his 40s, always impeccably dressed. Marcus had called him the smartest man I know. Right now, I needed smart. I must have looked a wreck. I hadn't slept. My eyes were swollen shut from crying, and I was still wearing the same black dress from the funeral, just with a cardigan thrown over it. He's destroying me, I whispered as we sat in his conference room, the city skyline gleaming behind him. Elijah, he's turning everyone against me. My aunt, my pastor, even my job. David fired me this morning. Jerome called him. He told them I was unstable. He's winning. Elijah just nodded slowly, letting me talk. He let the panic, the fear, and the injustice pour out of me. When I finally ran out of words, my voice cracking into a dry sob, he steepled his fingers. Chloe, he said, and his voice was so calm it startled me. I was Marcus's lawyer for 7 years. This behavior is exactly what he prepared for. I looked up confused. My tears stopped. Prepared for he knew this would happen. Marcus knew his father, Elijah said, leaning forward. He knew Jerome's pride. He knew his greed. And he knew how they saw you. He spent the last 3 years of his life setting up countermeasures to protect you when he was gone. My heart ached. The house, I said. The right of survivorship. That's what you mean. That was just the first piece of the puzzle, Chloe, Elijah said. That was the fortress wall. He knew his father would attack it. What Marcus didn't know, what I only discovered in the last 48 hours, is why Jerome would be so desperate. He slid a thick bound folder across the polished table. I've been doing my own digging since you called about the eviction. Jerome isn't just grieving Chloe, he's broke. I opened the folder. It was filled with financial reports, bank statements, and legal notices. Let's start with the house, Elijah said. You were right, Marcus bought it. But you don't know the full story. It wasn't a simple sale, it was a bailout. He pointed to a document. 2 years ago, Jerome's premier events was on the brink of collapse. Jerome, it turns out, has a significant gambling problem. He had been siphoning money from the company accounts for years to cover his debts. He came to Marcus, Elijah continued, begging for a loan. He needed $200,000 cash immediately. The bank was about to seize his business assets. I remembered that time. Marcus had been so stressed, so distant. He told me it was about his re-enlistment bonus, that there was a paperwork issue. He had been lying. He had been protecting me from his family's mess. Marcus gave him the money, I whispered. He did, Elijah confirmed. But Marcus was not a fool. He knew his father. He didn't give him a loan. He bought the house. The $200,000 was the purchase price. He made Jerome sign a standard sales agreement, effectively taking the house out of his father's name and putting it into yours and his. He knew Jerome would never pay him back. So he took the one asset he knew you loved, the one place you felt safe, and he secured it. He saved his father's company, and in return, he saved your home. The full weight of what Marcus had done hit me. It wasn't just a smart legal move. It was an act of profound protective love. He had seen this day coming. That's why Jerome is so desperate. I said, the pieces clicking together. He didn't just lose the house he thought was his. He lost the money he got for it. He thought he could have both. Exactly. Which brings us to this. Elijah turned the page to a new set of documents. Jerome's premier events is a shell, Chloe. It's hollow. He never fixed the underlying problems. He's missed payroll twice in the last quarter. He's drowning in debt to his suppliers. And worse, he slid a final official-looking document to the front. It was from the Internal Revenue Service. He hasn't paid his payroll taxes in over 18 months. He owes the federal government over $400,000. They're done waiting. They're preparing to seize everything, the business, the cars, even his personal accounts. A cold dread settled over me. So, that threat. You have no idea what Marcus was involved in. It was a bluff. He's the one in trouble. He's just trying to scare me. Elijah looked at me, his expression unreadable. No, Chloe, he said quietly. It wasn't a bluff. He just didn't know he was threatening the wrong person. He thought he was threatening a grieving, unemployed widow. He didn't know he was threatening the person Marcus left in charge. I stared at him. In charge? Of what? I stared at him. In charge of what, Elijah? I am unemployed. He got me fired. He's winning. What am I in charge of? Elijah held up a hand, silencing my panic. Chloe, breathe. What Jerome did to your job, we will address that. But it's irrelevant. He is swatting at flies while his entire house is on fire. He just doesn't know it yet. I didn't understand. I watched as he unlocked a keyed drawer in his own desk. He pulled out not a thin folder, but a thick, heavy, leather-bound binder. It wasn't labeled King Jerome. It was labeled King Marcus. He placed it on the desk between us. It made a solid, expensive sound. Jerome's threat, Elijah said, his voice low. You have no idea what Marcus was involved in. He was right, but he was also wrong. He assumed Marcus was involved in something illegal, something dirty. He assumed Marcus was just like him. He slid the binder across the table. It felt heavy in my hands. Marcus wasn't just a soldier, Chloe. He was a strategist. He knew his father's company was a sinking ship. He knew it was being weighed down by Jerome's gambling and Antoine's incompetence. He didn't want his family's name, his grandfather's name, to be dragged down with it. I opened the binder. The first page, protected in plastic, was a certificate of incorporation. Legacy Logistics and Events LLC. I looked up at him, completely lost. I don't understand. He never told me about this. He couldn't, Elijah said gently. He had to keep it completely separate, legally firewalled from his father. He started it 3 years ago. He used his re-enlistment bonus and his own private investments as seed money. He set up a board of directors, people he trusted, not family. He hired a professional management team led by a fantastic COO he met during a joint deployment in Germany. I flipped through the pages. Asset manifests, detailed bank statements, employee rosters, insurance policies. This was a real company. A big company. Marcus knew his father's business, Elijah continued. He knew the clients were good, but Jerome's management was terrible. He also knew his father was always desperate for cash, so Legacy Logistics made Jerome an offer. The realization hit me so hard I felt dizzy. When Jerome needed that $200,000, the money for the house. That wasn't the first time, Chloe, Elijah said, a grim look on his face. That was the last time. For the past 3 years, every time Jerome got into a gambling hole, Legacy Logistics was there. They didn't lend him money. They bought his assets. He reached across the table and turned a page in the binder. He pointed to a bill of sale. See here, Legacy Logistics bought Jerome's entire fleet of 5 custom catering trucks. Jerome got a quick $50,000 cash injection to pay off a bookie. Legacy got the assets free and clear. He turned the page again. And then, Legacy leased those same trucks back to Jerome's premier events at a premium. Jerome was paying his son's company just to use his own equipment. My jaw dropped. It was ruthless. It was brilliant. The main warehouse, the one on 5th Street where they keep all their supplies. I asked, my voice a whisper. Elijah smiled. Legacy bought it 6 months ago when Jerome needed to fund Bethany's kitchen renovation. The client contracts, Marcus knew which ones were profitable. Legacy approached those clients directly, offering better service for a slightly lower price, all perfectly legal. By the time Marcus deployed for the last time, Jerome's premier events had no trucks, it had no warehouse, it had no long-term contracts, and it was drowning in debt to the IRS. I finally understood. I leaned back in my chair, the binder heavy in my lap. It's a shell, I said. Jerome's company. It's just an empty, hollow shell. A shell full of debt, Elijah confirmed. Which is why he's so desperate to get his hands on this house. He thinks it's the only asset left. He has no idea. He's trying to steal a leaking lifeboat when his son already left you a yacht. I sat there staring at the financial statements for Legacy Logistics, a company I didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago. My mind was reeling. Marcus hadn't just protected me, he had built an ark. He had secretly saved the real family legacy while leaving his father with the hollowed-out sinking ship of his own making. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice sounding small in the opulent office. If he built all this, why did he? What was his plan? His plan, Elijah said, his voice softening, was always you, Chloe. He just had to make sure you were protected from every angle. He reached into a separate drawer and pulled out one final document. It was thick-bound in a simple blue cover and felt heavy in his hands. This is Marcus's last will and testament, Elijah said. He updated it just before his final deployment. It was signed, notarized, and filed with my office. It is the only valid will. My heart hammered. This was it, the final word. Elijah put on his reading glasses and opened the cover. It's quite straightforward, but Marcus was very specific. He begins by addressing his family. He cleared his throat and read, "To my brother Antoine King, we were born of the same blood but not the same spirit. I leave you $1. I gasped. $1? $1? Elijah confirmed, not looking up. He continues, "To my mother, Vivian King. You taught me the importance of family, but you never taught me how to stand up to our father. I leave you $1. I felt a cold chill. This was brutal. This was a message. And finally, Elijah said, his voice steady, "To my father, Jerome King. You taught me how to build a business, and you taught me exactly how not to run one. For these lessons, I leave you $1. Elijah looked up at me over his glasses. He legally names all three of them and gives them a nominal amount. This is important. It proves he did not forget them. It makes the will virtually impossible to contest on the grounds of omission. Marcus, my meticulous, brilliant Marcus. Even in this, he was a strategist. He then addresses his personal property," Elijah continued. "His military benefits, his life insurance, his personal bank accounts, and the house at 422 Willow Creek Drive are all left to you, his beloved wife Chloe King, which, given the joint tenancy deed on the house, is just a formality. The house was already yours." "And the company?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it. Elijah smiled a small, sad smile. "Ah, yes, the company. I quote, all my shares representing 100% ownership of Legacy Logistics and Events LLC, I leave to my wife Chloe King. She is the only one I trust to carry on this legacy with the integrity it deserves. She is the one who understands that value is not just about profit, but about community. She is, and always has been, my true partner." The binder in my lap suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The words blurred on the page as tears I thought I had run out of welled in my eyes. My true partner, the one thing his family had always insisted I was not. I didn't even realize I was sobbing until Elijah quietly slid a box of tissues across the desk. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. "I don't know anything about logistics. I'm a data analyst. I work for a nonprofit. I can't run a company, Elijah. I can't run an $8 million company." The panic was real. This was too much. This was a burden, not a gift. "Chloe," Elijah said, his voice cutting gently through my fear. "Marcus knew that. He knew you were grieving. He knew you had your own career. You don't have to run anything." He turned the page in his own copy of the will. He set it up perfectly. Legacy Logistics is managed by a professional independent board of directors. The chief operating officer, a man named Michael Vance, has been running the day-to-day operations for 2 years. He's brilliant. The company is stable. It runs itself. "Then, what am I?" I asked, confused. "What's my role?" Elijah looked at me, and this time he was genuinely smiling. "You," he said, "are the chairman of the board. You are the sole shareholder. The board reports to you. The COO works for you. You don't have to manage the trucks or the contracts, Chloe. You just have to manage the vision. You have the final say. You have the power to hire, to fire, and to set the company's direction. You have total, absolute control." I sank back into the leather chair. Chairman of the board, me, Chloe, the woman who just this morning had been called a monster by her aunt, the woman who had been excommunicated by her pastor, the woman who had been fired from her job because she didn't look good for the nonprofit's brand. That woman was now quite suddenly one of the most powerful business owners in the community. "Jerome has no idea," I said, the realization dawning. "He's out there right now trying to get people to invest in his hollow shell of a company. He doesn't know," Elijah finished, "that his son's widow, the woman he tried to evict and destroy, is the one person who holds his entire fate in her hands. He is drowning in debt. And you, Chloe, you are his single largest creditor." I just sat there. My mind, which had been foggy with grief and panic just an hour ago, was now spinning, trying to catch up. Chairman of the board, an $8 million company. Marcus had left me a fortress. He had left me an army. I was so lost in the numbers in the asset lists, I almost missed what Elijah said next. And Chloe, he said, pulling one more document from the Marcus King binder. There is one final item. He slid it across the desk. It wasn't a bank statement. It was the original sales agreement for the house, the one from 2 years ago signed by Jerome and Marcus. I don't understand, I said. We already established this. The house is mine. Yes, Elijah said, but look at the payment terms. Marcus was creative. I read the clause he was pointing to. It stated that the $200,000 payment was structured as a personal loan from Marcus to Jerome, with the house itself held as collateral. The loan was payable in full upon the death of either party. I still don't get it, I said. Elijah took off his glasses. Chloe Marcus didn't just buy the house from his father, he mortgaged it to him. Jerome took $200,000 of Marcus's money, and in exchange he signed over the deed as collateral. The loan agreement, which is ironclad, states that upon Marcus's death, the loan is immediately due, and since you are Marcus's sole heir, he let the sentence hang in the air. My breath caught. The $200,000 that Jerome got for the house is now a debt, Elijah finished, that he owes directly to you. You are his creditor, Chloe. On top of everything else, your father-in-law owes you $200,000, cash. I finally understood. I owned the house. I owned the real company, and I was the bank that held the loan on the man who tried to destroy me. I started to laugh. It was a strange, rusty sound that turned into a sob and then back into a laugh. I was crying and laughing at the same time. The woman who had been fired from her nonprofit job this morning, the woman who had been excommunicated by her pastor, the woman who was told by her aunt that she was a monster. That woman was now, for all intents and purposes, Jerome King's boss, his banker, and his landlord all in one. Marcus hadn't just built me a fortress. He had handed me the keys to the entire kingdom, and across town in the failing, hollowed-out offices of Jerome's premier events, the man who thought he was king was staring at his own ruin. Jerome slammed his fist on his desk. The cheap particle board rattled. "She's not getting away with this," he roared. "She thinks she's won. She thinks she's smart. She has no idea." Antoine, pacing the room, was sweating through his silk shirt. "Dad, the IRS, they're serious. They've frozen the main account. And Bethany's father just called. He's pulling his investment in the new venue." "Let him," Jerome yelled. "They're all rats deserting a ship." "Dad, the ship is sinking," Antoine shouted. "We have nothing. The trucks are gone. The warehouse is gone. All the good contracts are gone. What are we supposed to do?" Jerome was quiet for a long time. He stared out the window at the parking lot. His face, which had been pale with rage, slowly settled into a familiar, cunning mask. "We do what we've always done," he said softly. "We use our name, our legacy. We're still the kings. We call a meeting. We get the family. We get our friends. Pastor James, Deaconess Miller, your Aunt Josephine. We tell them we're expanding. We're offering a limited private investment opportunity. We're asking them for money," Antoine said, horrified. "After they find out the IRS is—" "They won't find out," Jerome snapped. "Not if we move fast. We just need a little capital to get us through this. We'll call it a legacy investment meeting." Bethany, who had been silently filing her nails in the corner, suddenly spoke up, a slow, venomous smile spreading across her face. "That's brilliant, Jerome," she cooed. "A private meeting. Just family and our closest, most trusted friends." She stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And you know who we have to invite." Jerome looked at her confused. "Chloe," Bethany said, her eyes glittering. "Are you insane?" Antoine asked. "After this morning, she'll call the cops again." "No, she won't," Bethany said, her smile widening. "Not if she's the guest of honor. Think about it. We invite her, publicly, in front of Pastor James and Aunt Josephine. We put her on the spot. We make it about family. We tell everyone we're trying to save the legacy. We tell them we've all had to make sacrifices. And then, we ask her in front of God and everybody to contribute, to sell that house and give the money back to the family that needs it. She'll be shamed into it. She won't have a choice. Jerome stared at her, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. He was impressed. "That's my girl," he said. "She won't be able to say no. We'll break her. We'll get the house and the money." That evening, I was sitting on my floor surrounded by the boxes they had so callously packed. I was holding the legacy logistics binder when my laptop pinged. It was an email, a formal, beautifully designed invitation. "You are cordially invited to attend a legacy investment meeting for the future of Jerome's premier events. As a valued member of our family, your presence is requested as we build the next generation of our legacy together." It was for this coming Sunday, after church. They were inviting me to a meeting. They were inviting me, the woman they had tried to evict, to a meeting about their company's future. I looked at the invitation. I looked at the binder in my lap. I looked at the sales agreement for the house, the one that made me Jerome's creditor. They had no idea. They had no idea who they were inviting. I forwarded the email to Elijah. "Looks like I have an event to attend on Sunday," I wrote. "Please clear your schedule. As chairman of the board, I think I should be there." The drive to the hotel on Sunday was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My hands were damp on the steering wheel. Elijah, sitting in the passenger seat, was silent, reviewing his notes. He had already confirmed that Jerome's lawyer would not be present. This was not a legal meeting. It was, in Jerome's mind, a public execution. "Are you ready for this, Chloe?" Elijah asked, as I pulled into the hotel parking lot. "No," I said honestly, my voice barely a whisper. "But I'm doing it anyway." "Good," he said, gathering his papers. "Don't say a word until I give you the signal. Let him dig his own grave. And remember, you hold all the cards. They just don't know the game is already over." The hotel was a mid-range, respectable place. The kind of place where people held Rotary Club meetings and wedding receptions. The sign in the lobby, written in elegant script on a cheap whiteboard, confirmed my worst fears. Jerome's premier events. A legacy investment meeting. Azalea room. My stomach twisted. Legacy. He was using Marcus's death as a sales pitch. He was leveraging my husband's memory to fund his escape from the IRS. We walked to the Azalea room. The doors were propped open. Inside, about 30 people were mingling, drinking coffee from silver urns and eating small pastries. They were all members of our community, our world. I recognized them all. It was a perfect cross-section of my old life. There was Pastor James shaking Jerome's hand, his face a mask of deep synthetic sympathy. There was Deaconess Miller, a woman who had always looked down on me because I worked for a nonprofit instead of finding a good husband. And there in the corner holding court was my Aunt Josephine, the one who had called me a monster. She saw me and her face hardened into a mask of pure contempt. Our arrival sent a ripple through the room. The polite chatter stopped. Every head turned. I could feel their eyes on me, judging me, whispering, "She actually came. Look at her with a lawyer. Jerome must be devastated, and she does this." Jerome was at the front of the room, standing next to a projector screen. When he saw me, he didn't look angry. He looked pleased. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He thought I had taken the bait. He thought I was here to be publicly shamed into submission, to be forced by my pastor and my aunts to give up my house. Vivian, his wife, stood beside him, clutching a small purse to her chest. She looked nervous. Antoine just looked bored, checking his phone. And then there was Bethany. My sister-in-law, in a bright red dress, looked positively triumphant. She leaned over to Antoine and whispered something, and they both laughed. She caught my eye and her smile widened. She was anticipating the kill. "Chloe, Jerome's voice boomed across the room, full of false welcoming warmth. "And Mr. Elijah, I'm so glad you could make it. We saved you a seat." He pointed to two empty chairs right at the front, directly in his line of fire. The trap was set. Elijah just nodded, his face impossible to read. "Jerome." We walked to the front and sat down. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes on my back. I just stared straight ahead at the projector screen, which read, "Jerome's Premier Events, The Next Generation." Jerome clapped his hands together, a signal for everyone to be quiet. "All right, folks, let's get started. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. It means the world to my family." He walked to the podium, the picture of the grieving, strong patriarch holding his community together. "These last few weeks," he began, his voice thick with carefully rehearsed emotion, "have been the hardest of my life. We lost my son, a hero, a soldier, my boy Marcus." Vivian produced a sob right on cue. Pastor James murmured, "Amen, brother." "But," Jerome continued, straightening his tie, "Marcus's passing has made me realize something. It's made me realize that legacy, family, that's the only thing that matters. We can't let what my father and his father built crumble." He was lying. Of course he was lying. He was using my husband's memory to cover his gambling debts. "Jerome's Premier Events," he said, clicking to the next slide, which showed a photo of their old, long-gone catering trucks, "is more than a company. It is a pillar of this community. It is a proud, Black-owned family business, but it has faced temporary challenges, the economy, new competitors, but we are strong. Our foundation is solid." He was a good speaker. I had to give him that. He was charismatic. He was weaving a story of a proud family business facing a tough market, and he was inviting them all to be heroes to help him save it. "We are here today," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "to announce a new phase, an expansion. The next generation of legacy. We are offering a limited private investment opportunity to our closest friends and family, a chance to get in on the ground floor as we rebuild stronger than ever." He looked right at me. His eyes were cold, dead. "We are a family that sticks together. We lift each other up, and we all of us, contribute what we can to protect the legacy." The implication was clear. It was a trap laid just for me. He was going to put me on the spot. He was going to use the pressure of my pastor, my aunts, my entire community to force me to sell my home and pour the money into his burning building. He thought I was walking into an ambush. He had no idea I was the one holding the bomb. Jerome sat down, a look of profound, grieving dignity on his face. The room was heavy with his performance. Pastor James murmured, "We are with you, Brother Jerome, a pillar of strength." My Aunt Josephine dabbed her eyes, glaring at me as if I were the devil himself. Then Bethany stood up. She was wearing a vibrant red dress, an accusation in a room full of somber grays and blacks. She didn't look at Jerome. She looked directly at me. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was her public execution of me. "Thank you, Jerome," she said, her voice bright and sharp, cutting through the murmurs of sympathy. "Thank you for that beautiful, powerful reminder of what family means." She turned her body, her full attention to me. The entire room followed her gaze. 30 pairs of eyes. Pastor James, Deaconess Miller, my cousins, my aunts, all on me. "Chloe," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet, as if she were speaking to a child, "it is so good that you decided to come. We were all so worried about you. We know how emotional you've been." I said nothing. I just met her gaze. I could feel Elijah's presence beside me, solid and calm. "And now that you've heard the plan," she continued, "now that you understand what's at stake, what the legacy means, This is really the perfect opportunity for you. A chance to show your loyalty. A chance to finally contribute. I could see Pastor James nodding slowly. He was buying every word. Bethany let the silence hang, relishing her power. This is your chance to make things right, Chloe. After all the confusion with the house, after you took that house from this grieving family, this is your opportunity to give back. She laughed, a small tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. If you really loved Marcus, if you really care about his legacy, you'll sell that house. Sell it, and put the money right back here, into the company, into the family. It's the only chance you have left, Chloe, to truly be a part of this family's future. The room was dead silent. This was the trap. This was the public shaming. They had cornered me. They had brought my pastor, my family, my community all to bear down on me. They were using my husband's memory to make me homeless. They all stared, waiting for me to break, to cry, to apologize, to obey. I let the silence sit for a moment. I looked at Bethany's smug, hateful face. I looked at Jerome, who was watching me with a look of cold victory. I looked at Antoine, who was already smirking. I took a slow sip of the cold coffee in front of me. I carefully placed the cup back on its saucer, the clink of the porcelain sounding deafeningly loud in the quiet room. Then I stood up. "Thank you, Bethany," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't even shake. "That's a very detailed financial suggestion, but I'm afraid I can't invest." The room let out a collective breath. Jerome's face darkened. Antoine barked out a laugh. "Of course you can't," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "How are you going to invest money when you don't have any? You got fired, you're broke. You're probably just here for the free pastries." The room chuckled. Pastor James looked down at his hands, embarrassed for me. I smiled. A real small smile. "That's not the reason, Antoine," I said. "I'm not investing in Jerome's premier events, for a very simple reason." I paused, looking around the room at all the hopeful, sympathetic faces of the people who were about to invest their life savings. "I can't invest because the company is worthless. It's a hollow shell." The room erupted. "What did she say? How dare she? Jerome, what is she talking about?" Jerome shot to his feet. "You lying, ungrateful, disrespectful." "Am I lying, Jerome?" I asked. My voice was clear. I turned to the small group of local business owners he was trying to impress. "Before you write a check, you should probably ask Jerome why he hasn't paid his primary food supplier in 6 months. They filed a lien against him last Tuesday." I turned to Deaconess Miller. "You should ask him about the 2 outstanding bank loans he defaulted on last quarter." And then I looked at Pastor James. "And Pastor, as a man of God, you should definitely ask him why the IRS has a lien against his business for $450,000 in unpaid payroll taxes." I know. Because as a data analyst, I know how to read public records. And they are very public. The room was in chaos. People were standing up, shouting questions. "Is this true, Jerome? You're taking our money when you owe the IRS." Jerome was speechless, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked at me with pure murder in his eyes. "But that's not even the biggest debt he's hiding," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent again. I looked at Jerome. "We talked about the house, the one you tried to steal from me. We talked about how Marcus bought it from you 2 years ago." I let that sink in. "But we didn't talk about how he bought it. He didn't just buy it, Jerome. He gave you $200,000 in cash to save this failing company from his gambling debts. And in return, you signed a personal loan agreement with the house as collateral. A loan that became payable in full upon his death." I looked at Aunt Josephine, at Pastor James, at Bethany, whose face was now a mask of absolute horror as she realized what I was saying. "Jerome isn't just a bad businessman," I said. "He's a bad debtor. And that $200,000 loan which he defaulted on the day he tried to evict me is now legally owed to Marcus's estate, which means it's owed to me." I picked up my purse from the floor. "I'm not here to invest, Pastor. I said, my voice ringing in the silence. I'm here as the single largest creditor in this room. Jerome's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He was trembling, a deep, guttural sound rising from his chest. "You're lying!" he roared, slamming his fist on the podium so hard the water pitcher jumped. "She's lying. This is slander. This is desperation. She's making this all up. She has no proof." He pointed that shaking, accusatory finger at me. "She's a broke, unemployed girl trying to steal from a grieving family. Actually, she has a great deal of proof." Elijah's voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a surgeon's scalpel. He stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. He had been silent this entire time, just watching. Now he commanded the attention of every person in that room. "My name is Elijah Price," he said, addressing the confused investors. "I was Staff Sergeant Marcus King's personal attorney for 7 years. And for the last 3, I have also served as legal counsel for his primary business holding." Jerome froze. His what? "The proof isn't just in a loan agreement, Jerome," Elijah said, his voice cold. "It's in the asset manifests, the client contracts, the tax returns, and the incorporation documents of Legacy Logistics and Events LLC. The name meant nothing to them. I saw Antoine and Bethany exchange a confused glance. Pastor James looked lost. I stood up slowly, picking up the binder Elijah had given me. "You don't recognize the name, do you?" I asked. I looked at Vivian, my mother-in-law, who was clutching her pearls. 3 years ago," I said, my voice carrying across the stunned room, "while you were busy calling me, worried that my nonprofit salary wasn't good enough for the King family name, Marcus was busy hiring a COO. I turned to Antoine and Bethany. "While you two were busy planning your $1,000 bridal shower and worrying that I wouldn't fit in with your new friends, Marcus was busy building a real company." I looked at Bethany. "While you were calling me a gold digger because Marcus bought me a new car, he was making me his business partner, the one person he trusted with his future." Finally, I looked at Jerome. "And while you were running Jerome's premier events into the ground, spending company money on gambling debts and covering Antoine's mistakes, Marcus was building an $8 million corporation." A collective gasp went through the room. "He did it quietly. He did it legally," I said. "He bought your trucks when you needed fast cash. He bought your warehouse when you couldn't pay the mortgage. He acquired your best clients when you stopped returning their calls. He built a real legacy while you were busy polishing a bankrupt shell." I let the words sink in. "He left you Jerome's premier events, a name, a reputation, and $400,000 in tax debt. He left me the assets, the logistics, the contracts, the trucks, the warehouse, and the future." I looked at Jerome, his face ashen, his mouth hanging open, finally, utterly defeated. "That family legacy you've been talking about all morning, Jerome, the one you're trying so desperately to save." I held up the binder. "I own it." The room was pure chaos. Jerome, his face a ghastly shade of gray, was clutching his chest, gasping for air. My arm," he stammered before his eyes rolled back and he collapsed onto the podium, sending the laptop and water pitcher crashing to the floor. Vivian shrieked a sound of pure terror. "Jerome, someone call 911. The investors, the people he had tried to swindle, were on their feet, but they weren't rushing to help him. They were yelling. "My money, Jerome," one of the business owners shouted. "You owe the IRS. What have you done with our money?" Pastor James looked like he had seen a ghost staring at me, then at Elijah, then at the man collapsed on the floor. Aunt Josephine was silent, her face pale, finally understanding. Antoine just stood there, paralyzed, while Bethany, my sister-in-law, was already halfway to the door. She looked back once, not at her collapsing father-in-law, but at her husband Antoine, with a look of pure disgust. She was a woman who had married into what she thought was a powerful, wealthy family. She had just discovered she had married into nothing but debt and disgrace. She didn't run. She walked out calm and collected, pulling her phone from her purse, no doubt calling her own lawyer. She was done. In the midst of the chaos as paramedics rushed in, Elijah leaned over to me. "Let's go, Chloe. This is over." We walked out of that room. No one stopped us. No one even looked at us. They were all too busy watching the legacy they had bet on implode. Jerome's premier events filed for bankruptcy less than a week later. The IRS seizure was swift and brutal. They lost their cars, their company, everything. The beautiful house they lived in, the one they had hosted so many parties at, while judging mine, was foreclosed on by the bank. Antoine and Bethany's divorce was finalized in record time. She took her son and moved back to her parents' state, erasing herself from the family she had tried so hard to be a part of. The only one who ever contacted me again was Vivian. She called me from a blocked number, her voice thin and broken. She was living with her sister. She begged me not to come after Jerome for the $200,000. "Please, Chloe," she wept. "He's a broken man. We have nothing left. Please." I sat in my house, my home, listening to her cry. I thought about the woman who had called me a monster, the woman who had let her son throw my things onto the porch. I took a deep breath. "I will agree," I said, "on one condition. You and Jerome will sign a legal document drafted by my lawyer stating that you will never ever contact me or my company again. You will never speak my name. You will never speak my husband's name. You will leave me alone forever. In exchange, I will forgive the debt." She agreed. It was the last time I ever spoke to her. I didn't take over the day-to-day operations of Legacy Logistics. Marcus had already put the best people in charge. But I did take my seat as the chairman of the board. And I brought my own vision. I was a data analyst from the non-profit world. I didn't just want to run a company. I wanted to build a mission. We launched the Marcus Initiative. It was a new branch of Legacy dedicated to recruiting, training, and hiring veterans and military spouses. We created a program that turned logistics drivers into logistics managers. We offered paid apprenticeships and real high-paying careers to the men and women who, like Marcus, had given everything, and to the spouses like me who had been left behind. 1 year later, I stood on a small stage in our new headquarters. The building was clean, bright, and efficient. And on the wall behind me, there wasn't a picture of me. There was a floor-to-ceiling portrait of Staff Sergeant Marcus King, smiling in his dress uniform. In the front row, Elijah sat clapping. I looked out at our first graduating class, 12 former soldiers and military spouses, all now certified logistics managers, all with jobs waiting for them at Legacy. "My husband Marcus," I said, my voice strong, "believed that a legacy wasn't just about what you own, it was about what you build. He believed in this community, and he believed in me." I held up the first certificate. "Welcome to the team," I said to a young woman, a widow just like me. Jerome had tried to steal a house. He had no idea that Marcus had left me an empire. He had tried to erase my husband's memory, but I had turned it into a living, breathing legacy, one that was bigger and stronger than he could have ever imagined. This story teaches us that true worth is not defined by those who try to diminish you. While others may see you as a failure or an afterthought, your value comes from your own resilience, integrity, and the success you build for yourself. Family is not always about blood, it is about who shows up, supports you, and respects your journey. Sometimes the greatest power comes from setting boundaries and letting go of the need for approval from those who are incapable of giving it.